By the powers vested in me as Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I hereby constitute this assembly as a legal congregation of the University of Pretoria. During this assembly, degrees and diplomas with all the associated rights and privileges will be conferred and awarded to the candidates whose names appear in the program. We request all of you to join us in silent prayer or meditation to give thanks for the achievements of our students. As Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria, I extend a hearty word of welcome to you at this virtual graduation ceremony. I would like to welcome our Honorary Doctorates, Dr. Abraham de Vries, Mr. Athol Fugard, and Mr. Aziz Pahad. The Dean and the Deputy Dean of the Faculty, along with all persons to whom degrees and diplomas will be conferred and awarded to. We also welcome families, friends, and spouses to this virtual graduation ceremony. This is the third virtual graduation ceremony the university has held in the past year, after we were obliged to depart from the traditional graduation format as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, which, as you know, has made large physical gatherings impossible for the time being. Our first virtual graduation season commenced just 10 days after the declaration of the national state of disaster towards the end of March 2020. It was memorable not only for that sobering reason, but also for a more agreeable one. During those first virtual ceremonies, the University of Pretoria conferred 11,001 qualifications on graduates in absentia. This was a record number for the university and one of the largest graduating cohorts, if not the largest, in South Africa at the time. I'm delighted to share with you that the autumn 2021 graduation season is now breaking that record. In this graduation season, we'll be conferring a total of 11,424 qualifications, including 198 doctorates and 1,289 master's degrees. This is a great achievement, especially in these uncertain and unpredictable times. Such an achievement is simply magnificent. I mean this on two levels. One is the outstanding personal effort you put into persevering with your studies when normal study routines and methodologies had suddenly been upended, and I'll say more about this later. The other level concerns the collective contribution of this graduating cohort to the skills of our country, and more broadly, our continent. Compared to the rest of the world, South Africa and Africa as a whole have very low graduation rates per capita, a state of affairs that perpetually widens the skills gap. The fact that we at the University of Pretoria are now graduating such a large number of cohort of graduates is good news indeed for the development of our country and the continent. But this welcome injection of skills is not only about numbers. Just as important are the kinds of skills and the quality of skills that you, our graduates, will be bringing with you into whatever career or study pathway you choose to pursue from this point. For instance, the University of Pretoria students once again excelled in the ITC, the initial test of competence, which is the first professional exam for prospective chartered accountants. In November 2020, students from our Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences again achieved first position in South Africa. This feat followed on the first place we achieved in the January 2020 ITC, when an unprecedented 7 out of the top 10 students in the country were from this university. In addition, UP won the 2020 Chartered Institute of Management Accountants CIMA Prize Winner Excellence Award, as well as the Institute's Global Excellence Award at its first ever virtual award ceremony. These awards recognize university partners with top performing CIMA students in case study exams, as well as university partners that have achieved the highest pass rates for CIMA exams. What makes these accomplishments even more special is that our students excelled despite the disruption of having their ITC exam deferred from June 2020 to November 2020 owing to lockdown regulations. Well done to every one of you who was part of this incredible effort. Not content with notching up all the accomplishments I've just listed, we are also making history. One of our PhD graduates, Dr. Tumeka Mashova Raimudzisi, is the first Black female chartered accountant to receive a PhD in leadership. This is a noteworthy achievement, testament to your commitment and dedication. Congratulations. If time permitted, which it unfortunately does not, there will be many other examples of achievement under pressure that I could share with you as testimony to the resilience and endurance of the human spirit. In my book, every one of you has shown resilience and endurance during unprecedented turbulence and upheaval. The university is proud of you all. All your hard work, tenacity and resilience has helped to get you to this point. Yes, the Institute certainly played its part. As the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria, I know what efforts and energies were invested in keeping the academic program going and enabling our students to succeed during the most protracted campus closures in our history. But what stands out for me is not the effort UP made in rolling out laptops and remote learning technologies, so much as the skills you, our graduates, gained from the experience. For our graduates to make a difference in society, they need to be creative, flexible, resilient, entrepreneurial, and collaborative. I can state with confidence that this graduating cohort has these qualities in abundance. They will serve you and our country well. University too has learned a lot from this pandemic. As you know, our preferred mode of teaching and learning before this health crisis has been the hybrid approach, a delivery model that makes use of traditional classroom-based learning tools supplemented by online and technology-supported activities. On the strength of our experiences online during this pandemic, we are reimagining the modes of teaching and learning that we are adopting for the future. Teaching and learning are going to be interesting spaces for innovation, creativity, and experimentation. Above all, we aim to provide a rich interactive experience that is educative and not just instructional, and which results in well-educated, skilled, socially engaged, and sensitive graduates, eager to transform our society, our continent, and the world. We also aim to enable students to become graduates who can engage in lifelong learning, where they unlearn and relearn. In this way, they can navigate the emerging world of work that is an outcome of multiple disruptions of the life and the world as we know it, including the disruptions caused by rapid technological change. In the near future, we'll be launching a Center for the Study of the Future of Work. Allow me to touch briefly on the disruptions you, our graduates, experienced during your studies in 2020. I know that all of you were affected by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic while you were studying. However, what I and my colleagues at the university do not necessarily know is what trials and tribulations you, individually and personally, experienced while completing your qualification. We do not know what difficulties and distractions were going on around you while you were studying for that crucial test, or writing or revising the next chapter of your thesis or dissertation, or what additional responsibilities you took on in your living space and with regard to your loved ones while soldiering through your year of completion. Were you perhaps one of the many South Africans separated from loved ones as a result of traveling restrictions and border closures? What personal sadnesses and sufferings and hardships did you endure as a result of COVID or otherwise in that most crucial time of your studies? Did you suffer loss of family and close ones, friends, fellow students, or colleagues? My colleagues and I cannot know what your lived experience was as you toiled to complete your degree, diploma, or certificate. What we do know without a shadow of doubt is that your success is hard-won and deeply deserved. Earning a qualification from the University of Pretoria is an achievement to cherish. Earning qualifications in the time of COVID-19 is in a class of its own. You, together with the 11,001 graduates of autumn 2020 and the 1,380 graduates of summer 2020, are unique. You have succeeded, and we celebrate your achievement today. On behalf of the broader community of the University of Pretoria, please accept my heartfelt congratulations. Your graduation ceremony is your moment of triumph to savor, celebrate, share with family and friends, and remember for the rest of your life. We hope to one day return to physical graduation ceremonies where graduates can walk across the stage in the presence of family and friends and take photographs. For now, virtual graduation ceremonies such as these play an indispensable role in your journey with the university. This is because a virtual graduation is a legally constituted assembly that enables you to formally graduate so that you can receive your certificate and use it to open whatever doors you have intended to unlock, whether in the form of further studies, of course at the University of Pretoria, or in your career or profession. May it lead you to more opportunities and serve you well. Turning now to the future. In the same way that you and your fellow graduates are on the verge of the next stage of fulfilling your dreams for your life, so is the University of Pretoria. As I briefly mentioned earlier, we've been using the challenges presented by the global health pandemic to begin rethinking, reimagining, and repositioning the university itself. The university can play an essential role in co-creating the country and continent we want post-COVID-19. Here at the University of Pretoria, we see an opportunity to be one of the agents and drivers of change in Africa and globally, finding and deploying innovative ways to address poverty, unemployment, inequality, and social injustice. UP, as you know, is a hub for new ideas. When it comes to COVID-19 research, we are involved at multiple levels. We are researching genome profiles to be able to identify who in the population is at higher risk of contracting fatal viruses and other diseases. We are also researching how people in society behave during a pandemic. Because if we don't understand this, we cannot manage the spread optimally. We participated in international COVID-19 clinical trials and produced sanitizers, face masks, and face shields. Our Faculty of Health Sciences quickly incorporated COVID-19 into the primary healthcare curriculum. This is how we will need to respond to pandemics in the future, with rapid responses focused on multi-sectoral interventions. For example, our university is the only representative from Africa in the new University Social Responsibility Network, an international group of 16 top universities. And last year, the Times Higher Education's Impact Rankings rated UP among the top 100 universities in the world for its social and economic impact in 3 categories, based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, otherwise known as the SDGs. These are quality education, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. We envisage a better, more sustainable world characterized by prosperity, genuine democracy, peace, equity and equality, social justice, and ethical use of all resources. And we are convinced we can co-create this just new world through high-quality hybrid teaching, together with transdisciplinary research and social engagement that is impactful. And of course, this co-creation must harness the collective expertise, energies, and goodwill of our family of alumni, among whom you, this season's graduates, can now be counted. As the new alumni of the University of Pretoria, remember the values from UP to always strive for excellence, persevere, respect everyone, be creative, innovate, embrace diversity, grow, be a lifelong learner, be kind, and make a difference every day. This is what makes the UP way of life. I appeal to you to be part of our quest to rethink, reimagine, and reposition the University of Pretoria, and in so doing, contribute to the co-creation of the Africa we want. Please take the next step by downloading the UP Connect graduate app, keeping you connected to your alma mater and offering access to the many opportunities available to our alumni wherever in the world you are. Remember to always keep in contact with the alumni office at UP and let us know when your contact details change. No matter where you end up in the world, remember that you are part of the UP family, whose overarching strength is its diversity in terms of staff, students, the programs offered, and areas of research that define its excellence. We're an institution on its way to becoming a beacon for demographic diversity and inclusivity, a future-oriented and focused university that is a driver of social change. Congratulations on your graduation and enjoy the celebrations with your loved ones. Take pride in the sense of achievement that comes with knowing that you have excelled against all odds. I now request the Dean to introduce to me the candidate for the Honorary Doctorate.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to introduce you to Dr. Abraham de Vries for the conferment of the degree Doctor of Literature honoris causa. For more than 60 years, Abraham H. de Vries has made a significant contribution to South African literature. From early on, his short stories challenged existing norms and introduced innovative narrative strategies. He was recognized locally and internationally for his work. Since his early years, de Vries has been an outspoken anti-apartheid and anti-censorship critic and registered his opposition in demonstrative ways. As an Afrikaans writer, de Vries has cherished the broadening of the scope of his language in a multilingual environment. De Vries is the leading short story writer in Afrikaans literature. He has published more than 20 short story collections and anthologies, a novella, a poetry collection, several travelogues, as well as a variety of academic and popular publications. He translated literary works from Dutch and produced several video programs on South African writers. As a young writer, he associated himself with the Zestiger movement, and his first collections of short stories clearly bear evidence of the modernist experiments of the time. His oeuvre is characterized by its diversity and literary sophistication. On the one hand, throughout his career, he wrote short stories that in their apparent simplicity recall, often anecdotally, the rural lives of communities and individuals in the little Karoo of his birth. His tales rely on humor, irony, and satire, and adeptness of language use. On the other hand, de Vries employs sophisticated literary techniques where the textual organization, the play with signifiers and metaphor, and literary intertextuality forewarn the reader of the postmodernist layeredness of his texts. His work has been cited, analyzed, and critiqued in books, as well as numerous peer-reviewed articles, dissertations, and theses. His stories are taught in literary classes locally and abroad, and selections of his work have been translated in German and English. His literary achievements as one of the primary Afrikaans authors, his commitment to social and political liberty, and his conscientious commitment to Afrikaans as an encompassing symbol for all its speakers make Abraham H. de Vries a worthy recipient of the degree Doctor Literarum UP honoris causa. Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I request you to confer the Honorary Doctorate on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Literature honoris causa with all the rights and privileges on Dr. Abraham de Vries. I have the honor of requesting our Honorary Doctorate to deliver their address.
Professor Coupe, members of Council, Professor Reddy and members of the Faculty of Humanities, students, ladies and gentlemen, familie and vrienden. One day last year, while I was in my study, reading the completely unexpected letter from you, Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Julie Andrews started singing on my radio the sentimental song with the unexpected philosophical truth Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. So somewhere in my youth or childhood, I must have done something good. This sort of experience is what makes me believe in wonders. The writing of short stories is not, as is often thought, a talent. It's a life, a way of living. Kortverhale is nie 'n talent nie. Dis 'n leefwyse. Short stories are not viewed as the giants of literature. The shortest English story with a beginning, a middle and an end is said to be Ernest Hemingway's. I quote, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." 6 words. The Afrikaans translation is shorter. Te koop, baba skoene, nooit gedra. 5 words. The phrase short story is an obvious description of an intricate genre which already has existed in the Bible, in Greek mythology, science fiction in modern times, in the poems en prose of Michaud, Jan Rabie and Breitenbach. My stories, like those of my Afrikaans counterparts, are all written in the African language, which Professor Mahamud Mandani of the Makerere University in Uganda regards as the most successful decolonization initiative in Africa. End of quote. But let me turn to Afrikaans at the University of Pretoria with its department and academic leaders who are well known outside the borders of our country. We all know that our world has become a town. Ons aarde het 'n dorp geword. That is the background against which the University of Pretoria's tydskrif vir letterkunde is important. This journal, with its Afrikaans title, dating back to the 30s of the previous century, is now available in e-format in Europe and in Africa, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Cameroon. To group Afrikaans together with other languages of the continent seems to me a praiseworthy transnational move. Allow me to convey my gratitude also to my beloved Klein Karoo. Aan u professore Willie Burger, Hein Willemse en aan die hele departement Afrikaans en Nederlands vir lang ure se werk. Baie dankie. Thank you to the university for the honor bestowed upon me with this prestigious accolade. It is sincerely appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Abraham de Vries, for your address. I now request the Dean to introduce to me the candidate for the Honorary Doctorate.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honour to introduce you to Mr. Athol Fugard for the conferment of the degree Doctor of Literature, honoris causa. Harold Athol Lanigan Fugard is considered to be one of the world's foremost living dramatists. Throughout his career, he has made a contribution of inestimable importance to South African drama, literature and cultural life, and indeed to that of the entire English-speaking world. Fugard's work is remarkable for its explicit focus on South Africa and on the lives of marginalized South African individuals and communities. In plays like The Blood Knot in 1961, Busman and Lena 1969, Sizwe Bansi is Dead 1972, and The Island 1973, Fugard gives dramatic centrality and the full humanity it implies to characters normally pushed to the periphery of society and discriminated against. In The Blood Knot, for instance, Fugard presents half-brothers, one dark-skinned and the other light enough to live as a privileged white man. The brothers' ambivalent relationship serves as both a rich metaphor for the uneasy interdependence of black and white South Africa and as a visceral dramatization of the system's human cost. Fugard's writing shows the influence of global philosophical traditions such as existentialism, but his penetrating explorations of wider issues of identity and meaning are always firmly rooted in the local. As a result of Fugard's work with black actors and communities, as well as the growing reputation of his plays, the apartheid government placed severe restrictions on his work and movements, prohibiting publication and performance of his plays. This never deterred him from tackling specific aspects of apartheid legislation in his plays, including racial classification in The Blood Knot, the Group Areas Act in Bushman and Lena, the pass laws in Sizwe Bansi's Dead, the Immorality Act in statements after an arrest under the Immorality Act, and the imprisonment of political activists in the island. In Master Harold and the Boys in 1982, the issue of racism is also central, but the play shows the capacity of individuals to rise above the reductive identities shaped for them by society. It is this unconquerable belief in the human spirit that ultimately makes the film versions of his work, The Road to Mecca in 1991 and the Oscar-winning Tsotsi in 2005, so deeply moving. Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I request you to confer the Honorary Doctorate on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Literature honoris causa with all the rights and privileges on Mr. Athol Fugard. I have the honor of requesting our Honorary Doctorate to deliver their address.
Greetings, my fellow young South Africans. I must confess that it is a huge honor, in fact, a little intimidating, to be with you here today. You are on the brink of a huge adventure as you leave this university, with your achievements in the sciences or in the humanities behind you. Hard to believe that I am sharing this occasion with you. Apart from the personal honors celebrated today, our country is in very serious trouble, and it is going to need all of us to come forward with our best efforts to help us get out of this dilemma that we are in now. COVID-19 has affected all of our lives. We have lost friends, relatives to this dreadful epidemic. But what is important is for us to know and to remember as we go into our daily lives after this occasion, that it can be defeated. Other countries have already advanced far in their vaccination programs, and our turn will come soon. And with that done, we must really try to do our best, both for the country and for our fellow South Africans. We have grown up in a very complex society, and we really must do all that we can to overcome the various obstacles that separate us from one another. I, on my side, will certainly be doing that. And I hope that time will come when we will look back on this occasion and think that, thank God, we were equipped by our studies, by our work, to cope with it. This is my symbol of an achievement I think I don't deserve, but your university has seen it fit to bestow on me an honorary doctorate. I dedicate what I have received today to South Africans, past, present and future, who have to carry on the good work. Bless you all, and thank you for allowing me to join your company on this very, very important occasion. Thank you, University of Pretoria, for this honor that you've bestowed on me. I almost doubt whether I am worthy of it, but in your judgment you have decided, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Athal Fugard, for your address. I now request the Dean to introduce to me the candidate for the Honorary Doctorate.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I have the honor to introduce you to Mr. Aziz Pahad for the conferment of the degree Doctor of Literature honoris causa. Aziz Pahad is one of South Africa's most well-known public intellectuals, internationally recognized for contributions to local and international peace, security, justice, and international solidarity. Pahad's career spanned more than 6 decades as a young political activist in the anti-apartheid struggle and culminating in his 1994 appointment as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in the first democratically elected South African government. During the 1980s, Pahad played a key role in preparing the ground for talks with the then South African government and later participated in the negotiations that ended apartheid to shape the birth of a democratic South Africa. As Deputy Minister, he was involved in developing the foreign policy of the new South Africa and co-shepherded the country's return to and active role in the international community. His intellectual contribution is reflected in his book, Insurgent Diplomat, Civil Talk or Civil War, which provides an in-depth historical account of an era signaling great change in South Africa and the world. With conceptual and empirical depth, Pahad provides an engaging and penetrating analysis on the making of post-apartheid South Africa and the post-Cold War world from the perspective of someone who had been deeply involved in the process of shaping the history of South Africa and its region. Throughout his life, Pahad's ideas and actions have been dedicated and aligned to the core values and principles of building a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world, thereby contributing to the ideals and practice of promoting global South African and international cooperation towards strengthening the ideals of global responsible citizenship. Mr. Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I request you to confer the honorary doctorate on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Literature honoris causa with all the rights and privileges on Mr. Aziz Pahad. I have the honor of requesting our honorary doctorate to deliver their address.
Chancellor, Professor Nkutlu, Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Professor Kupe, Members of Council, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Professor Reddy, staff and students, distinguished guests. I am very grateful and thank the University of Pretoria for the great honor and privilege to receive this honorary doctorate. I especially appreciate the award since this university has become a leading citadel of learning, not only in this country, but indeed has risen to its historical calling as an African institution by embedding itself in a pan-African ethos and spirit. However, in accepting this award, I am also deeply mindful of the volatile, complex, and uncertain times we now live in. The COVID-19 pandemic has accentuated the underlying fault lines of the global community, bringing with it rising levels of despair, discord, anxiety, and disillusionment. Let me be so bold as to say that the coronavirus did not create these fault lines. It merely exacerbated them. But my assertion begs the question of how did we get to such a fragile and fragmented state of global relations in the first place? I recall over the many years of my involvement in international relations, the standard academic analysis has been that after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Cold War ended and the US emerged as a leading global political and economic superpower. It was preferred that humanity had at last reached the golden age of democracy, peace, prosperity, and a strengthening of mutual economic and political world order. The WTO and the UN multilateral system were to be the pillars of a new multilateral utopia in contrast to narrow nationalism and unilateralism. This was the promise of a new and better world for all that never came. The world changed for the worse. The tipping point was the 9/11 terrorist attack against the US that strengthened and consolidated the influence of US right-wing foreign policy makers. A process was unleashed that fundamentally undermined the rules-based system of international law and multilateralism. Charles Krauthammer, a leading US neocon ideologue, argued that, I quote, "At the end of the Cold War, the US faced a unipolar moment when no other power existed to challenge American hegemony, and the US in future will act as a custodian of the international system," unquote. The US National Security Strategy document of 2002 stated that, I quote, "The United States will not hesitate to strike preemptively against its enemies and will never again allow its military supremacy to be challenged," unquote. Over the years, the US has forged coalitions of the willing and demanded the prerogative to, quote, "act as a custodian of the international system," unquote. In 1997, the neocons who had gained key positions in the Republican administration set up a new group called the Project for the New American Century to shape a new century favorable to American principles and interests. They hope to achieve this objective based on a Reaganite policy of military strength and moral clarity. In short, to build on the success of the past century, ensure America's success and greatness in the next. They wrote to President Clinton in 1998, calling on him to adopt policy to remove Saddam Hussein's regime from power, ensure the safety of U.S. allies Israel and moderate Arab states, and protect the oil in the region. They called for preemptive American strikes on rogue states like North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, and for the U.S. to reorient its political and military strategy to China. It is my assertion that post 9/11, the very basis of international law has been undermined and multilateral institutions like the United Nations system have been fundamentally weakened. Today, the exaggerated narrative of terrorist threats is the continuing rationale for Pax Americana. The consequence of such policies is today Africa and the world is facing one of its greatest political, economic, social, cultural, and existential crises. Characteristics of this crisis include the failure of globalization, the growing influence of the military-industrial complex, the dominance of neoliberalism and the Washington Consensus, the disregard of the UN Charter and international law with impunity, growing threats to regional and international peace and security, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, the growth of populist political and economic nationalism and anti-democratic tendencies, and the unprecedented consequences of COVID-19. The tendency of the more rich and powerful countries to overbuy and hoard the COVID-19 vaccines is a shocking example of narrow jingoistic nationalism. The Atlantic Council, a leading U.S. geostrategic think tank, in September 2016 warned that during 2020 to 2030, the world will be characterized by spiraling inequality, economic and perpetual wars, and insecurity. It went on to say there will be a breakdown of order and widespread violent extremism in many parts of the world. Ominously, many other United States and European academic institutions and think tanks have made similar predictions. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in his speech to the United Nations General Assembly in 2018 warned that, I quote, "Our world is suffering from a trust deficit disorder. People are troubled and insecure. Among countries, cooperation is less certain and more difficult. Divisions in the Security Council are stark. Trust in global government is fragile. Today, world order is increasingly chaotic. Universal values are being eroded. Democratic principles are under siege. The rule of law is being undermined, and multilateralism is under fire," unquote. Where will this trajectory of destruction lead to? What is the fate of our fragile, fragmented world? Events on January 6, 2021, when thousands of neo-fascists stormed Capitol Hill and entered the U.S. citadel of power and symbol of democracy, left the U.S. and the rest of the world stunned and in search of answers. It is my view that we will experience many such incidents globally, including in the U.S. and in other developed and developing countries, institutions of higher learning must grapple with the question: is it a reality that today countries, including the US and other NATO members, are openly abusing their political, economic and military power to achieve regime change simply because they can? It seems that many established principles and reference books extolling the virtues of American and European democracy and good governments, which have influenced so much international theory and practice, will have to be re-examined with greater urgency. Today, we're experiencing the growing political, economic and cultural influence of emerging countries including China and Russia. China's President Xi Jinping, speaking at the recent World Economic Forum's 221 annual conference said, I quote, "To beggar thy neighbor, to go it alone, and to slip into arrogant isolation will always fail. Let multilateralism light our way towards a community with a shared future for mankind," unquote. President Putin called on humanity to act before the world is destroyed by a nuclear catastrophe. President Biden has to do much to restore the US's standing in the world. He must, for the sake of all humanity, find common cause with other global leaders to return the world to a more stable, peaceful, and prosperous world order. Now more than ever, the world is in need of true leadership to inspire a united and decisive global response to the threats and challenges that face us all. Throughout history, the examples of moments of unprecedented crisis that present threats to the very future of humanity, and humanity responded as a united and decisive force to defeat such threats. I truly believe that we live in such a time. That said, we would do well to remember at times like these that the human family remains bound together as never before, as communities of faith brought together by our mutual vulnerabilities and an abiding sense of solidarity, compassion, and interdependence. These have been the essential values that have guided South Africa's foreign policy since 1994, profoundly informed by our global landscape of grave asymmetry and deep inequality. Chancellor, I am confident that given the challenges humanity faces, today's University of Pretoria graduates, researchers, academics, and future graduates will join thousands of other counterparts in Africa and the world to rebuild trust and defeat all tendencies to slip into arrogant unilateralism. Together, we can build a united, peaceful, and prosperous Africa and a better world. I thank the University again for the honor bestowed upon me and add my heartfelt congratulations to all the graduates today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz Pahad, for your address. I hereby confer and award all degrees and diplomas in absentia with the associated rights and privileges to all candidates whose names appear in the graduation program.
Doctor of Literature in African Languages, Puleng Nkomo. Thesis: The Evolution of the Sesotho sa Leboa Young Adult Novella. a critical and comparative study of the years 1940 to 1969. External supervisor, Dr. V.M. Mujela. Doctor of Philosophy in International Relations, Arshad Abbasi. Thesis: The role of soft power in transforming the India-Pakistan conflict, a Pakistani perspective of prospects and challenges. Supervisor, Professor C.A. Isike. Creative Writing, Barbara Ann Adair. Thesis: In the Shadow of the Springs I Saw, and Shadow and Shade. Supervisor, Professor D. Medley. Political Science, Robin Blake. Thesis: A content analysis of the land language articulated by the political elite concerning South Africa's land question after 2013. Supervisor, Professor G. J. M. Wolmerans. Development Studies, Moffat Chiba. Thesis: Social and Economic Change and Changing Food Security, a qualitative analysis of the household level dynamics in Shamva District, Zimbabwe. Supervisor, Professor V. Tebe. Mike Chipere. Thesis: Mobile Money Discounting and Currency Abandonment, Livelihoods and Monetary Practices in Rural Binga, Zimbabwe. Supervisor, Dr. P. F. D. Krich. Creative Writing, Angel Dion. Thesis: Guilt and Its Repercussions, Bernard Malamud's The Magic Barrel. Supervisor, Professor D. Medley. Development Studies, Beatrice Dube. Thesis: Distributive Justice, Water Allocation Reform in the Greater Tzaneen Municipality. Supervisor, Professor I. Pikirai. External Co-Supervisor, Dr. V.T. Gumete. In History, Alban Gambi. Thesis: Waterford U.R. Gamhlaba, Apartheid and the Establishment and Growth of a Multiracial School in Exile between 1963 and 2000. Supervisor, Dr. G. Ngube. Political Science, Marley Holtzhausen. Thesis: From Washington Consensus to Relational Economy, Relational and Human Economy Approaches to Addressing Poverty and Inequality in South Africa. Supervisor, Dr. C. V. Lenga. In Sociology, Saint Inaka. Thesis: Post-war labor market reconstruction, the case of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Supervisor, Professor D. R. Bonnen. International Relations, Rich Mashimbie. Thesis: The tension between non-intervention and non-indifference in the SADC mediation in Zimbabwe between the years 2007 and 2013. An analysis. External Supervisor, Professor W. S. Zondi. Political Science, Lebohang Mutsumotso. Thesis: Winnie Madikizela Mandela and Assata Shakur's self-writing, Torture, Authorization and Liberation. External Supervisor, Professor W. S. Zondi. In History, Lufuno Mlaudzi. Thesis: Historicizing the Politics of Buhosi Buhulu, the Vendor Polity and State Formation in South Africa between the 1800s and 2020. Supervisor, Professor L. Kriel. Co-Supervisor, Professor T.W. Simpson. Creative Writing, Florence Ndia. Thesis: The Emotional Well-Being of the Polygamous Woman in Lola Shainen's novel, The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. Supervisor, Professor D. Medley. African Languages, Vusmuzi Nkosi. Thesis: African authors' perception of women's achievements, exploring cultural expectations in selected Zulu literary texts. Supervisor, Professor N.B. Zondi. Political Science, Tinuwade Ojo. Thesis: A study of financial inclusion and women's empowerment in South Africa. The case of female entrepreneurs in Gauteng. External Supervisor, Professor W.S. Zondi. History, Christian Pfeiffer. Thesis: The strategic and political influence in the development of military intelligence in the South African Defence Force between 1961 and 1990. Supervisor, Professor T.W. Simpson. International Relations, Josail Tawana. Thesis: An analysis of South Africa's compliance with its reporting obligations under selected core human rights treaties. External Supervisor, Professor W.S. Zondi. Co-Supervisor, Professor D.D. Kladi. Master of Arts, Tsekgofatso Modubu. African Languages, Christina Mabena. Ancient Languages and Culture Studies, Danielle Garber. In Applied Language Studies, Amani Mohammed. Archaeology, Timon Dutoy with distinction. Matapelo Pizzo. Diplomatic Studies, Unarine Mudimeli. Deborah Siraze Garcia. English, Marinda Bueta with distinction. Liesel de Wet. Environment and Society, André de Jong. French, Jean Mbu Epse Mbu with distinction. Linguistics, Mahabo Lidwaba. Philosophy, Cindy Friedman with distinction. Political Science, Zainab Olaitan. Security Studies, Michelle Blake. Anne Charles Braga. Nogwazi Magwaza. Tiana Sakota. Tyne Williams with distinction. Master of Social Science, Anthropology, Anna James with distinction. Development Studies, Tariwa Chikangeza. Chenaimoyo Hwehwe. Robin Gillison. Ritumetsi Lehema. Tanaka Mayimba. Olsen Maposa. Matabo Sinamolele with distinction. Michelle Tsonga. Heritage and Cultural Tourism, Elizabeth Kalitz with distinction. Tiffany Morolong with distinction. Heritage and Museum Studies, Arthur Khokong. Lindinxiwa Mahlasela. Amanda Sanger. History, Berger Foster. Riatile Moncho. Celia Becker with distinction. Rachel Buertas with distinction. Andrew Harris with distinction. Tembinkosi Kumalo. Sociology, Untitled Chapter. Tangible Heritage Conservation. Mabafukeng Huane. Salome Leroux, with distinction. Emilia Zambri. Bachelor of Arts Honours, African Languages, Wanda Dlamini. Nombulelo Makiwane, with distinction. Lindiwe Mazibugo. Nogwazi Nene. Buzani Nkomo. Sanele Shabalala. Ancient Languages and Culture Studies. Cole Beertre. Tanya Bierkes, with distinction. Angela van Rooyen, with distinction. Deirdre Zastron. Applied Language Studies. Maria Carbonell, with distinction. Yannicka Maritz, with distinction. Anja Oberhauser. Melissa Rest. Siska van den Heever. Daniela van den Horst. Archaeology. Louis Moroka. Justin Pence. Christine Smith. Magdalena Sutherland, with distinction. Peter Tron. English. Ikaira de Freitas. Emily Harrison, with distinction. Sabrina King, with distinction. Michelle Morris, with distinction. Kewen Olivia. Rudy Rieders. Rizan Ruas, with distinction. Given Sekasimbe, with distinction. Rochelle Skade. Valdu Strijdom. Caitlin Studder, with distinction. Kayla Thomas, with distinction. Luke van Rooyen. Jordan Vries, with distinction. French. Amy de Wet. Samgelisiwe Dube. Victoria Embleton, with distinction. Lintle Muswatsi. Noguzula Nyembezi. Tasman Schultz. Neil van Graan, with distinction. Desiree Viljoen, with distinction. German. Kelly Andrew. Kunet Treurnicht, with distinction. International Relations. Amir Bagarioromi. Angel Cartwright. Vumile Lulu. Lerato Dube. Safia Aesop. Pietros Fondoulis. Nirvana Govender, with distinction. Moyowabu Kabwa. Khumuzo Komane. Constantia Mahlangu. Licia Mariti. Tsenulo Matlala. Tavonga Masetese. Jacobus McLachlan, with distinction. Monty Musala. Ashley Neft. Feliciana Nezingu. Bobby Ngwenya. Sheldon Reed. Umpile Selebi. Letabo Sipato. Daniel Sese. Carla Sonsini. Bernardus Tron. Literary Theory. Mary Xavier Base Pandong Akuwombo. Joylene Jacobs. Philosophy, Alexander Ehlers, Michael Foucher, Johan Andrew Uscher, Ethan Foster, Brandon Walsh. Political Science, Siyabonga Didiza, Ilse Labaskachny, Simone Loeb with distinction, Michal Naidu, Wandile Ndlovu, Susan Pikirai, Tiesha Pillay with distinction, Kabelo Sikhoto, Tando Tanda, Tembelihle Zwane. Translation and Professional Writing, Karel Venter. Bachelor of Social Science Honours, Anthropology, Hannah Akat with distinction, Stephanie Cookson with distinction, Demi Dyers, Melissa Kenny, Salem Makwarela, Bongiwe Ndlovu, Bronwyn Pfeiffer with distinction, Tsiamo Setuke, Mareike Steinfart. Development Studies, Bongiwe Koza, Stembile Malope, Abednego Maposa, Nelisiwe Maseko, Alton Mashanyare, Mutena Mate, Zianda Mhlawuli, Buntle Modubu, Dinewo Mkhotsi, Lihlohonolo Mutlowung, Mufaro Mpofu, Minentle Mtembu, Caroline Seichiro, Litabo Sinyeka, Nicole Shamuyarira, Mpilo Shazi with distinction, Muriel Tsebe, Kevin Zingwiro, Snobile Zuma with distinction, Gender Studies, Camille Harris, Digeledi Ndeza, Kuku Shandu. Geographical Sciences, Geography and Environmental Science, Boniswa Tele. Heritage and Culture Tourism, Sindiswa Gubula, Siobhan Jansen van Vieren, Nompilo Mulata, Nolien Wilsnach with distinction, Heritage, Museum and Preservation Studies, Nancy Collette with distinction, Mapule Maluleke, Kutlwano Mokhojwa, Jabulile Ntuli, Julia Rulofsa. History, Chelsea Campbell, Brittany Clark with distinction, Olwetu Dlanga, Ghislaine Hart, Duncan Lotter with distinction, Caroline Lowings with distinction, Gladys Mukwena, Kudzai Neherera, Olivia Schkare, Krierize Tsokodibane, Masesi Tsodetse with distinction, Pumza Kengeza with distinction, Joniko van der Wald with distinction, Michaela van Ingenkoll with distinction. Industrial Sociology and Labor Studies, Puseletso Makafula, Mampi Malaji, Nolutando Pasha, Kalen van der Berg. Philosophy, Politics and Economics, Zuko Godlimpi. Henry Dillon Peens. Sociology, Sintu Kolozayo. Tulahanyo Kula. Pride Matebula. Duncan van Wyk with distinction. Justin Verity with distinction. Bachelor of Arts, Languages, Tisita Black with distinction. Amanda Bukhoshi. Sheldon Brown. Nichelle Camacho with distinction. Sharon Chauke. Aaron Klutter. Daniela De Sousa with distinction. Michelle Embleton. Cassidy Johnston. Alexander Kubirska. Ross Lobsher. Lisa Leroux with distinction. Jared Lesser. Cornei Hunisa Lideker. Kanzonet Malarba. Marin McKay with distinction. Tessa Moffat. Talia Mudley with distinction. Matapelo Musia. Ngonidzashe Nika. Andrinai Urlemans with distinction. Ankia Pepler. Sarah Place with distinction. Megan Rainbird Webb. Tendani Sipuma. Kohola Sitole. Kimberly Swan. Cara Terry. Bonatsejo Tsenkeng. Nadine van Achterberg with distinction. Danita van Jerden. Corley van die Kerk. Nomdeni Sambo. Bachelor of Political Science in International Studies, Lirato Poko. Constantino Avacumides. Tamron Boyce. Kamkhelo Choshane. Leilani Kutsier. Delaine Del Valle. Pilile Lamini. Robin Ferreira. Reese Foster. Tanzile Gama. Busisiwe Hlongwane. Lihlohonolo Jamda. Fatima Khalifi. Khosikhadi Kunaite. Lirato Lisiba. Sharnai Liber. Offense Make. Bradley Marsdorp. Tabang Mashangu. Josias Mahube Reineke. Sisa Mahoro with distinction. Nkenzane Maluleke. Tabang Mamushi. Rita Manganye. Leo Mazorodze. Nervali Mulu. Lorenga Mutokwa. Bongiswa Msibi. Nakedi Msimanga. Samia Naidu. Jean-Pierre Nau. Palisa Nkosi. Leletu Nokele. Babalo Ntogo. Nogubonga Nyembe. Amanda Nzama. J.D. Ann Peterson, Tshegofatso Ramachela with distinction. Nomahlozi Ramohloki, Laura Rubidge with distinction. Tabitha Sagandira, Arvash Siupol, Kensani Shibambo, Ndlavutelo Shikwambana, Rungando Sibanda, Lorinda Simao, Karabo Shabalala with distinction. Gustav van Yerden, Rogine van Tonder with distinction. Shanley Webb, Robert Willows, Thomas Wilson, Asake Klemiya, Grace Yav, Paulina Zulu. In political studies, Godwin Kanengoni, Sivenga Majebe, Khunzi Palwane, Tabang Baloyi, Luto Bobe, Mara Brindle, Ntsovo Chauke, Jessica Dioncher, Dimpo Ditlopo, Tandega Dlamini, Zidan Gulam Jusub, Armin Kifik with distinction, Suhail Lambat, Rebecca Maria, Luandiswa Madlala, Litlokhonolo Maepa, Tsulufelo Majake, Yanga Malutana, Tsakane Maluleka, Oratile Mangwane, Nicholas Mare, Amugelani Mashele, Siwakile Mazibugo, Jade McGee, Nobuhle Mnikati, Mihle Mnweba, Grace Mudau, Lebohang Mufukeng, Kumo Mokwana, Kiamogetswe Mosetle, Tusang Moyo, Tato Motle, Nicole Nochel, Taylan Napoleon, Batseba Ndlovu, Anele Ngobo, Nomafu Ngubane, Ompile Nkosi, Snovuyo Ntsongozi, Newo Pitso, Nonjabulo Shabalala, Joshua Volpe with distinction, Bachelor of Social Science, Heritage and Cultural Tourism, Michelle Bester with distinction, Sarah Gombele with distinction, Matsidiso Masayela, Kitso Matabologe with distinction, Sisipho Mbana, Dikeledi Mpepya, Ahmed Mohammed, Innocentia Nkosi, Hannelise Schneepel, Zander van der Merwe. In Industrial Sociology and Labor Studies, Nadine van den Jever, Ineke de Beer, Riamogetse Diale with distinction, Rihanna Glover with distinction, Kongelani Koza, Tamia Kirkman, Tabang Kobeng, Rifilwe kopa with distinction. Ketiwe lamola, tabang litswalo, ntabiseng litakong, mapitsi mabela, aviwe mado, mpo mafila with distinction, nobesutu mahlangu, palisa majake, Martha Malikane, Lebogang Mwabelo, Johanna Mkhwatleng with distinction, Tebogo Mpelo, Amogelang Ntladi, Yonela Ngasane, Judith Shongwe, Mulugadi Shwacha, Tsepiso Shabalala, Christina van Straten. Philosophy, Politics and Economics. Ndumgayise Dlamini, John Hansen, Papama Jafta with distinction, George Kaloinov, Vian Kellerman, Robert Klein, Tato Maja, Sindiswa Morule, Tsogofatso Pake, Tsulufelo Pasha. Achievement Awards. AP Grove Floating Trophy, Ankia Pepler. GS Nienaber Floating Trophy, Cara Terry. Getaway HCT Honours Award, Nolien Vosnach. Historical Association Award for History, Michaela van Ingen-Kahl. Oxford University Press Award, Emily Harrison. CF Nievout Award, Laura Rubidge. Dr. Hanish Book Prize, Magdalena Sutherland. J.L. van Schaik Prize for History, Michaela van Ingen-Kahl. Politica Award, Armin Kifik.
Let us give our graduates a big hand for their hard work and perseverance. I would like to thank their families, friends, and spouses for supporting our graduates during their studies. We have now come to the end of the proceedings. Please join us in singing the national anthem. By the powers vested in me, I hereby dissolve this assembly of the University of Pretoria.
Gaudiamus igitur juvenestum suum.